of Saturday jobs you did, because it's the front page of The Sun today that Lady Louise Windsor, who is Sophie and Edward's daughter, royal, has been doing an ordinary sort of Saturday job. She's been working in a garden centre, and everybody's so incredibly impressed by this that it is the front page lead of The Sun.
Counting the peonies, as they say, which is a very good headline, I have to say.
I mean, you have to say it's great, isn't it, that she's done an ordinary Saturday job like anyone else.
£6.83 an hour?
Well, she's been waiting for her A-level results, yeah. Well, this is interesting because we've been asking you what your Saturday job was, and here we go. Shelley says, when I was at school, I got an evening job in a chip shop. This was in 1985. I got paid £1.26 an hour, but used to get free chips, which was great. At that time, a bag of chips was 30p, chips and gravy was 35p.
Ooh.
So £1.26 an hour, at least you could have a good meal.
Yeah. How much was the curry sauce, though, Joe? Was that extra on top?
Mushy peas.
I'm going to up the ante a bit with this with David. I worked as a cleaner inside a nuclear reactor. Hinkley Point 2 is being built, 8 teams of 2, each with a vacuum cleaner, starting at the bottom of the reactor, working our way up to the top. My team was the last out of the reactor. What a fantastic sight. The team ran various tests and I moved to London for training. Good times. Anyway, he's still with us. I'm now retired and volunteer for Wallingford Accessible Boat Club, taking disabled wheelchair users for trips on the Thames in an adapted boat.
Brilliant.
Well done, you.
But my goodness, that is good.
Oh,
You're cleaner inside Hinkley Point.
I might have thought twice about it,
Yeah. Hinkley is our big... In fact, there are 3 Hinkleys now, I think, down in Somerset. Steve says, I started a paper round at age 10 for about a year, and then moved when I was 12, and I started working in a dairy parlour for about a year. Then during holidays only, I worked on the land till I finished school. And Alan says, he's in Land's End. Hi, Alan. When I was at school, I worked weekends and holidays on the fishing boats. It's important to do a grounding sort of Saturday job.
Yeah, it's not just about earning the money, it's getting to it on time.
It's learning about the world of work, isn't it?
The world of work, absolutely.
Interacting with people and actually realising the world doesn't revolve around you, I guess.
Talking of interacting with people, today's front pages.
Yes, let's have a look at them.
Yeah.
The Times is leading on the staffing crisis in British care homes because they say agencies are now going to be able to seek overseas workers to plug the gap.
Onto The Guardian, covering the ongoing scandal over water companies' executive pay in spite of several damaging PR disasters and, of course, latest, the sewage going into our seas.
Yes, isn't it lovely? The Mail is leading on the scramble for university places following yesterday's A-level results.
Express, leading on the leadership, hopeful Liz Truss's plans to smash, as he said, the rail unions in response to the continuing strikes.
The Telegraph leads on a bombshell report indicating that lockdown may have killed more people than COVID.
On to the Mirror, which has an exclusive, the troubling case of an 87-year-old man who waited 15 hours for an ambulance after a fall. Yeah,
he fell outside and he couldn't move him, so while they were waiting for the ambulance, his family sort of built a little tent around him.
Yeah, but a makeshift goal.
With a goal, and umbrellas and things like that. Isn't that terrible? And as we've been talking about, The Sun has a rather more light-hearted leading story reporting that the Queen's granddaughter, Lady Louise, has taken a Saturday job at her local garden centre.
Counting the peonies, as they say inside. That's a good headline.
Yeah, it is. Time to go through the papers now. Joining us this morning, author and academic Joanna Williams and former advisor to Tony Blair, John McTernan. Good morning to both of you. Right, what are we starting with then?
I think I'm looking at lockdown deaths.
Oh, Telegraph front page, right,
yes. This is a shocking report, isn't it?
It's shocking, all the more shocking, sadly, because it was predictable. A number of people were actually saying that this would be the case, that this is what would inevitably happen as a result, essentially, of closing down the NHS and turning it into a national COVID service for the 2 years of the pandemic. Statistically, it's quite a complex story. Essentially, it's saying that more people are dying than we would expect at this time of year, that since the start of June we've had more than 10,000, so we're not talking small numbers here, we're talking very substantial numbers, more than 10,000 people not just have died in this country, but above the seasonal average, so above where we were over the course of the past 5 years pre-pandemic.
This is because they missed screening appointments, seeing doctors and getting medical treatment?
Well, possibly. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for it. So they're saying that certainly circulatory diseases, heart diseases, diabetes, those seem to be the leading causes of deaths. Cancer, we know, is coming. Cancer deaths, there's a lot of undiagnosed cancer still out there. And these are diseases, for the most part, that if they are treated in a very timely fashion, if people get the help immediately they suspect there's something wrong with them, then they can be prevented.
Do you know, I mean, we all remember, don't we, during lockdown, seeing so many interviews and hearing interviews with specialists, particularly cancer specialists, saying this is going to happen, and it has happened. And it's interesting, the Daily Telegraph, their headline is, "Lockdown feared to be killing." It's happening still.
Happening now,
it's not as if it's just something that happened during the pandemic.
But COVID is still killing people. The figures they're quoting here are, in the week ending August the 5th, 469 people died of COVID. So that's 1,600 people a month dying of COVID. And the truth is, there was no good option during the lockdown. If we hadn't turned the NHS into a COVID service, so many more people, thousands, hundreds of thousands, would have died of COVID. And there was going to be a consequence from that. The NHS was running hot before the pandemic, is now in crisis, as we can see. The ambulance story.
Yes, I mean, that's the story that's the front page of the Mirror, isn't it?
Yeah,
and looking at that, there's this terrible case of this 87-year-old man.
Well, the stories I'm hearing from around the country where temporary shelters are being made by the ambulance services in different places, so that one ambulance driver can look after 3 patients before they can get into A&E, because it's a crisis of A&E, it's a crisis of beds in the NHS, it's a crisis of social care, in people not being able to get out of hospital into social care beds, and so you've got this system on the edge of falling over completely.
Yeah, this is done in Cornwall, and they have noted a particular problem in Cornwall with ambulance availability, because they're literally queuing outside the hospital, people in them trying to get them into the hospital beds.
If you go to any hospital in London this morning, you'll find ambulances queuing. It's happening everywhere across the country, and I'm very surprised actually this has not been an issue in the leadership campaign in the Tories. What's causing it is COVID staff shortages inside hospitals, increased demand on beds in hospitals, people coming in for treatment now who've been waiting because of the pandemic, and it's just there's not enough nurses, not enough doctors. Lots of our stories today in the front pages are all connected, aren't they?
Yeah.
They need to go abroad to get social care staff so we can actually have our homes, our residential care homes, fully staffed, so they can be full of people who can move from hospitals, so then other people can go in from A&E, and then. So I think there's a lot of connections here, and it's just...
What happened to those Nightingale hospitals? But clearly, they managed to get them in place pretty quickly during COVID.
So they were never used because there were never enough staff to run them.
Right, so they got the beds, you just can't get...
They had the space, the Excel, and they used the big exhibition centre. They set them up, but they were there for if there was a catastrophic crisis, and thankfully we avoided that in the health service. But it's the...
Don't we seem to have been very slow off the mark addressing this problem? I mean, we knew as soon as we rolled out the vaccines, we must have been able to sense that we were going to come out of it sooner or later. And there should have been people actually sort of understanding that this sort of shortage.
Well, I agree with you, and health secretaries have failed to face up to this. That basically the BMA, the doctors, the RCN, the nurses have been saying for a long time. I mean, even the former chief executive of the health service said there's a funding crisis in the NHS that was visible from the moon. There's been a lot of warnings and too little action.
A-level results yesterday, today clearing, everyone trying to get through to find out if they can get a place. 43,000 of them, the Daily Mail saying.
No, absolutely. We saw lots of happy smiley faces yesterday, and still on the front pages of some of the newspapers today of 18-year-olds celebrating their exam success. But the other side of this story is 43,000, as you say, without a university place. And the papers are suggesting a number of reasons for this. I mean, there just so happens to have been a bulge in the birth rate 18 years ago, and there are more 18-year-olds around in search of a place. But again, I think this is another consequence of lockdown as well. There were a number of young adults who postponed university places for a year and deferred and have decided to take it up once university returned a bit more to normal, so they're now still in the system. But also, I mean, despite Brexit, there is a 7% increase in the number of international students in university. It's very funny because back in 2016 we were being given these dire predictions that nobody from abroad would want to come to a British university. Well, that seems to have turned out to be very not true. But
the universities look upon foreign students as cash cows.
Absolutely. And so they're carrying on getting them. They've found a way, like I say, despite the dire warnings we were given about Brexit. But I just feel sorry for these students. I think that's my overwhelming sentiment in response to this story. I feel sorry for them because of the disruption they've had to their education for the past 2 years. I feel sorry for them because their exam results are essentially a political football. They're being manipulated 1 year up, they're being manipulated 1 year down, and they just don't seem to have much connection anymore, certainly on a national level, to the effort that students put in.
And the other thing is, when they actually get to university and they do their 3 years, the price they have to pay for that,
completely.
I think it's 6.6% they have to pay per year now on their student loan, their student debt. I mean, no one would be paying a mortgage rate of that. It's
what the Bible calls usury, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It used to be condemned as a sin.
Yeah. And still, a lot of the universities are doing remote learning as well. So they go there, they pay for, university places in halls of residence, and they sit in their halls, being remotely taught.
Young people are going to be paying the price of the education lockdown for a very long time, and I think it's one of the unspoken problems that.
But isn't it your former boss's fault for insisting that
My
every
former
child...
boss?
Well,
Tony Blair put the fees in place, didn't he?
He put the fees in place, and he also sort of
1,000.
created the system where more and more youngsters are expected to go to university.
Yeah, but
more than is
A knowledge-based economy was the phrase that was used.
Yeah, but that's because most of us in Britain actually work in successful knowledge industries, which are export trades, whether it's TV or advertising or legal services or accountancy. One of our greatest assets in the UK is exporting knowledge services. And between probably its estimates from Tory ministers, that up to 70%, former Tory ministers, up to 70% of young people could go to university and productively have a career after that. If we're going to be a successful post-Brexit economy, we need to invest in what we're great at, not in what we're not great at. And we're great at white-collar services, and that needs graduates.
But I think the other reason why I feel sorry for these students, these 43,000 students now missing a place, is because they've essentially been told since the age of 5 or 6 at school that going to university is the only option.
Yeah.
That if you want to make a success of your life, you go to university. Well, actually, do you know what? That's not true. I know plenty of people who haven't been to university, who've made a very, very successful life for themselves, many of whom are actually earning far more money than me, who did go to university.
Apprenticeships for engineering.
Exactly. So it's not the only option in life. You're not a failure if you don't go to university. And yet we've kind of had these completely arbitrary targets, 50%. Was for many years. Now we kind of pluck out the random figure of 70%. And what that does is it actually sends a message to the 50% who don't go, or the 30% who don't go, that they've failed somehow. And I think we have to send the other message to young people and actually say, do you know what, not going to university is not the end of the world, and there are plenty of other things you can do.
It is definitely not the end of the world. The trouble is that we've got some professions now that insist on a degree that they didn't used to need at all. I mean, journalism is one of them.
Yeah.
I was apprenticed. I never went to university.
We've raised the school leaving age to 18 for a very good reason. And we're actually a much more highly educated society. It actually makes us sometimes more fractious on social media. Social media is both angry, it's also informed. And so our country's changed because the world is changing, and the world of, I was the second year in Scotland of kids who went to schools where the school leaving age was 16, raised to 16. So I think this thing evolves, and we have to make sure, absolutely right, we have to make sure what we're offering to young people gives them opportunities to grow, to make money, to learn, to travel, and to accept that we do need more apprenticeships. That's been a catastrophic failure in the last decade. Not enough apprenticeships.
Obviously, if all else fails, you become a boss of a water firm.
Absolutely.
And do
Oh,
that
wouldn't
nicely.
we all like to be there?
The
because,
Guardian,
yeah, the Guardian
with this extraordinary story, a day after it's revealed that they've opened the storm drains with raw sewage spilling onto our beaches, into our rivers, and they are being paid what?
Well, look, they are bureaucrats. They're public servants, but they get themselves paid like they're captains of industry. And that is the thing. They don't set the prices, that's set by the regulator. They don't set capital investment, that's set by the regulator. They don't set targets for leaks, that's set by the regulator. So all the things that normally a business leader would have to do to make the company work is done, it's told to do it by the regulator.
What competition is there? There's water and there's water. You can't get different water. So I'm scratching my head as to why you should have competing companies.
The reason it was privatised was simple: to get capital in, because in the 60s and 70s not enough was being invested in it, because money was spent on schools or housing or railways or whatever. But you can't have a heavily regulated industry and then pretend that these people are massively entrepreneurial. Any of us on here, we could do those jobs. Maybe not as well as them, but I mean, given
They're not exactly doing
given what I was going to say, given what their performance is, I mean,
Given the salary, I'd like the opportunity to try.
just a day, just 1 or 2 days. That's all.
I'm sure I could
They're
pick
getting
it up.
bonuses of 100 grand.
No,
Bonuses.
it's really disgusting. I mean, I think what we're seeing across all sectors of our economy, I mean, particularly the energy sector, is the consequences of this obsession with privatisation that we had 20, 30 years ago really coming home to roost, where we've got companies that have just been run down into the ground, exploited for profit.
And many of them owned by foreign companies.
Exactly, yes, yeah. And
Which is unnerving, to say the
It is,
least.
and you just look across so many different sectors now, and we're really struggling, and British people are losing out when you compare our situation even to countries across Europe. You can see we are the ones who are paying far more, and actually French companies own a stake in our power. Why is that? That's not fair, is it? Just feels really unjust.
The French state company owning some of the buses where the unions are on strike today across London.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're having to negotiate with a French company to get a deal.
Will all of these troubles come to roost, given the fact that we're probably only about a year and a half away from a general election?
I thought you were going to say a year and a half away from a Labour government, which will solve all these problems.
That's what you can't help.
Or on Parliament.
Yeah.
Who
Well,
knows, eh?
No, I'm Parliament.
I mean, these are going to be massive election issues, aren't they? Because we're in a year and a half's time, these problems aren't going to be solved. So we're going to be still.
Yeah, I mean, today's front pages are the next general election campaign, aren't they? The state of the NHS, the state of the privatised industries, strikes, cost of living, NHS, social care.
And fat cat bosses getting fatter. Yeah.
Yes, fat cat bosses, and maybe if they stood up at work, they'd not be as unhealthy.
You're into that now, are you? Standing up at work's meant to be very good for you. We've been talking a lot this morning about Lady Louise Windsor working in the garden centre. What sort of Saturday type jobs did you do?
I stacked shelves in St Cuthbert's Cooperative in Morningside in Edinburgh, and I joined, the first time I joined the union, I joined the Shop Workers Union Usdaw, and I'm still a proud member of Usdaw to this day. I've stayed in that union, a good Labour union that's always supported the Labour government.
What did it teach you doing that sort of job?
It taught me to actually listen hard to what customers want, because in the end, that's what you're doing it for. You're stacking the shelves, but when they ask you where something is, you can't go, I'm the shelf stacker. You've actually got to go, actually it's in the aisle 3, and you realise bits of your memory are actually get quite good. So yeah, that's where fish paste is, that's where bovril is, that's where... So it's good, that was good.
So what about you?
Well, I had loads. Oh yes, from paper round at the age of 12 right the way through cafes and restaurants. Yeah. But my favourite one of all, I grew up in Middlesbrough. There was the Porthole Cafe, which was faced onto Albert Park. It was owned, the claim to fame is it was owned by Chris Rea's parents.
Oh, really?
Oh, my God.
Amazing.
Yeah. And there was a little hatch that led onto literally a porthole, and there was a Mr. Whippy ice cream maker. And my job during the summer holidays, I stood there and I made the
That
Mr.
has to be
Whippies.
one of the best
It was
jobs.
amazing.
And
I
put
love
flake
that
in
job.
for the 99 as well.
Absolutely.
That's a brilliant job. That's one of the best, isn't it? Great. So that's what we're asking today is, did you do a sort of lowly Saturday type job?
Nothing lowly about Mr. Whippy's.
Gosh, it really is one of the best I've heard of. But what sort of Saturday job did you do? And what do you think it did for you? Do get in touch. GBViews@gbnews.com.